Hello, my long-suffering children. What a long week. Before we begin, special thanks to Glitterbot5000 for the new channel art. I'll link to their channel and to Sam's channel in the description, so check them both out. Anyway, today we're looking at the opening to King Arthur, the Kingstone, a historical fiction novel by Sam Rowe. Uther, 480 AD. Uther gazed into the flames, thoughts racing through his mind, following the wisps of smoke as they rose to the roof. A thick mist covered the ceiling, slowly drifting through the hatch, keeping the hall warm. He narrowed his eyes and he scanned the room, observing each object in turn with lazy eyes, and willed all the muscles in his body to relax, slouching slightly in his throne. He barely noticed the door opening. "Uther," said Bress, after having closed the door shut. "Another battle lost," said Uther. Bress had barely washed all the blood off his body, but had come at the slave's summons. An empty sheath dangled from his belt, which he held uselessly in his hand. "I'm not sure how long we can keep Gododin safe. We have no allies, and the tides of war are turning against us. We're all weary. That even applies to you, Bress. I can see it." "I am," he admitted simply, staring straight back at Uther. The latter's hand instinctively went to the scar above his eye, feeling it as if to remind himself of the battles he'd been in. I'm dithering. I need your advice," said Uther. He tried to see how to turn the sentence in his head without seeming too hesitant, before finally coming to a decision. "Arthur's birthday has passed now. It's high time for him to be fostered, in my opinion. I'm sure Aegir is going to disagree, though. What do you think?" Bress thought for a second, then nodded. "I'm not sure what you want me to say. He's of age. He'll be an adult soon enough. If he's to succeed you, he does need an education, and we do need to secure our ties with other kingdoms. So what do you recommend?" "Send him. But do ask Aegir for her opinion." "Thanks, I can't stop thinking about it. I have no choice but be a ward, though forcing it upon someone else is hard." Bress nodded knowingly. "I have no children, though I can say it was hard being separated from my brother." Uther stood up. Compared to Bress, who stood at about 69 inch tall, Uther's 73 made him feel even taller. "Thank you for your counsel. I'll see what Aegir has to say tomorrow. After all, there's much to think about." He accompanied Bress to the door, shaking his hand as he left. He knew what he had to do, but he wasn't happy about it. A small part of him hoped Aegir would understand, but he knew what her real response would be. "No," she said, as soon as he breached the topic. "That was quick," he joked, and immediately sobered up, seeing her glare. "We need alliances, and they need an education. I mean, we were both wards, so I don't see the problem. But you know that was different. I was betrothed to Garrulus, and you were in exile for Beelin's sake. And we're better off from it. Uther realized his mistake too late. Aegir was fuming. "Better off?" "You know that's not what I meant," Uther started calmly, but she cut him off again with a glance. 10 years of hell with that oath. Also my dear father could get some Cornubian land so that he could get richer. Well, fuck that. I'm not having our children hoard out." "Then let Morgana be a religious ward, with no betrothal involved. Gwydion could do it." Aegir considered it. "She could," she said carefully, weighing each word, "but we'd not be able to visit her. I'm afraid that'll be the situation for all the children. The options for the boys are Gwynedd, Aforig, or Mana. Not even that last one, really. Doing it with our own vassal is pointless." "And who goes where? How'd you even make that choice?" Uther paused to recollect what he'd planned the night before. "I think Uther should go to Gwynedd, and Madog to Aforig. As to my heir, having Arthur across the Gaulish Sea would pose a problem, while Madog, well, he could even stay there if he wanted to." "Logical as always," said Aegir after a beat. "Fine then, I won't fight with you." "If you oppose it that strongly," Uther trailed off. "No, do it." Uther got up. He made as if to embrace Aegir, but she stiffened. "Well, you can explain this to them. Go. Just go." While Uther knew she wouldn't change her mind once she'd made it up, he still hurried over immediately to where his children were playing outside. Morgana was watching over her two brothers as they ran about on their sticks as if they were horses. Children, come here. He took a second to compose himself. The boys looked at him expectantly, and Morgana had her usual slightly detached look. This isn't going to be easy to say. He braced himself, sighing. Your mother and I have agreed it is long time you were sent as wards to other families. Morgana looked surprised, and as he expected, the boys didn't understand. What's a ward? Asked Arthur. Uther edged in closer to him and Madog. You will be sent to live with our friends for a few years, until you reach adulthood. Uther hoped they couldn't see the sadness in his eyes. Morgana still looked shocked, struggling to compose herself. The silence grew uncomfortable. Do you have any questions? He asked. Where? Asked Morgana. For you, Ireland. But the Scots are our enemies, she protested. Uther shook his head. Not all of them, my sweet. It'd be with your aunt and Uncle Connall. When are we going? You and Morgana will leave in a few weeks. Do you understand why? No, he replied. Uther acknowledged. That's to be expected. Well, I'll put it this way. It's a matter of tradition. It's our duty as a family to solidify links with others. Do you want to get rid of us? No, said Uther. He grabbed one of Arthur's shoulders and looked at him. We all love you very much, but we need to do this. Are we all going at the same time? Asked Morgana, her arms crossed, still a few paces away. Madog is too young, he admitted. So when will he go? In 2 years, perhaps less. Once he'd made sure the children had no more questions, he started making his way back up Eden. The morning rain had formed dew on the grass, and he filled his lungs with the fresh scent, calming him a bit. Uther! Uther did not need to turn around to picture Pled's expression of anguish. The children! How? Why? I knew you'd be against it. Uther sighed. At the end of the day, you don't have a say in this, Pled. You know it has to be done. Despite all that happened to you, said Pled, immediately regretting it as he gauged Uther's response. No more talk of this, please, replied Uther in a firmer tone. He was not looking to scorn his old friend, but his resolve was firm. Pled looked at the ground and managed. As you say. He walked off. Uther tried to find something to say, anything, but could only watch aimlessly as Pled walked back down the hill. He wanted to avoid giving his children the experience he'd had at all costs. Living as a beggar prince with his brother had humiliated him down to the bone. Sometimes he wondered if he'd ever shake it off. Their instruction had been strict, unproductively so, and he had learned far less about the classics and language than he'd have liked. Even Aegir's Latin was prettier than his functional, martial brogue. He was born and raised a warrior, yet given a kingdom by happenstance. He kept the memories of his dead family in a small pouch tucked away in one of the hall's baskets. The rings of his 2 brothers and father all passed to him as they died one by one. He had thought of getting rid of them, but the disrespect would have eaten away at him. Aegir had come out to look for him, and as she approached, he could not even bear to look at her. I only want what's best for the children, but we need to face the reality of the situation. We are at war. The time of the Romans has passed, and Gododin needs another warrior king. Arthur cannot stay here forever. With Tudwal's death, we no longer have a professor. You can't teach him Latin forever by yourself. He needs proper instruction. You speak only of Arthur. Uther shrugged. I'll love all 3 of my children, but it's a hard fact Arthur is my heir, and will secure the strongest tie. It must be a blood link, and the only reasonable choice is Cadwallon. Have you sent word? I'm going to, said Uther. I've asked Morden to ask him. They've fought side by side many times. I'd even say they're closer than I am to Morden. We'll see what he has to say. So, we open, unfortunately, with a cliché, thoughts racing through his mind. And we're going to want a new paragraph at he narrowed his eyes. We have a close repeat of eyes there also, which isn't ideal. In general, we have a lot of words for not a lot of action that doesn't tell us much about Uther's internal state. He narrowed his eyes, he scanned the room, he observes things, he has lazy eyes, he wills the muscles in his body to relax, he slouches. This tells us he's anxious, but it really is just a lot of words that don't say much. If the reader doesn't know who Uther is, which they're probably going to, considering they picked up a book on Arthur, but you're grammatically almost implying Uther is a slave at this line. Breasts barely washed off the blood, but had come at the slave summons. It's just a little bit weird wording. And Uther's bit at the end, very end here, I'm not sure how long we can keep guarded and safe. It's unclear it comes from him since the camera was just on breasts. And we don't have any attribution to Uther here. So you have an issue with using a lot of sticky words and weasel words, ones which lengthen sentences without adding much meaning and serve mostly to slow reading down. You could do a lot less in terms of how many syllables you're using. He tried to see how to turn the sentence in his head without seeming too hesitant before finally coming to a decision. You could also just say he picked his next words with care, and you pretty much say the same thing with many fewer words. With the sticky sort of words that occur very often in English, your reader is kind of just glossing over them without taking in their meaning actively anyway. So in general, try to cut down on things like that. And you should group a single character's actions and their dialogue. Throughout this, there's an issue I keep seeing where somebody will have an action, and then you'll new paragraph with some unattributed speech while they're speaking to somebody, which implies to us that you've now shifted the camera to the other person. So you want to lump dialogue and actions of a single character together. Uther's "thanks, I can't stop thinking about it" feels informal to me compared to the surrounding speech. I don't see this as a hugely recurring issue, but it pops up occasionally and takes me out of the story a bit. So Uther says, "I had no choice in my own wardship, or I had no choice but be a ward." This is a great opportunity to him calling up in his head what resentment or other emotions he might have felt and letting him wonder what his children would feel toward him upon sending them off. The height comparison between Uther and Bress feels a little granular to me. Saying Bress towered over most men, Uther was even taller, would be more evocative while giving the same information. So this is the end of the first scene of the book. My overall structural issue with it is we have very little value shift from the beginning to the end. Uther starts out anxious but pretty determined in his course of action. Then Bress appears, and he doesn't seem to relieve his anxiety or change his mind over the course of the scene, so it seems to me what's mostly happening is we're just being informed of coming events. Shifting from Uther's anxiety to clear resolve, maybe with Bress even overstepping his boundaries, telling the king to get himself together, rousing Uther to anger before coming to resolve, this would add some needed tension to this opening scene. Throwing in some foreshadowing imagery and really doubling down on that great moody tone you started out with would be awesome too. Some people say you should never open with dialogue in a scene, and I disagree. I like this. "No," she says. But I do really think you need to establish the scene directly after this opening line. Most of this scene takes place in effectively a blank white room, and it would be great to have this be in a location different to the previous one, maybe outdoors under a tree. I'd like to see Uther's reactions to his wife's arguments. I don't really know what he's thinking or feeling. It seems the queen is unwilling to make big sacrifices for politics, which is understandable from a human standpoint, and I wonder what Uther thinks about that. Is this a habit she has had all her life? Is Uther annoyed that she can't just be the queen she's supposed to be? What sort of things is he thinking? he's clearly sympathetic to her and shares some of her worries, but we're not really getting a look into his head. And again, would just like to see touchstones in this scene. Sensory information, interesting sights, specific objects, etc. The word slightly is a pet peeve of mine, where Morgana says she has her usual slightly detached look. In my mind, the word slightly never does much except take up 2 syllables. Here, I don't think we lose or gain anything by saying slightly detached look over detached look. The line Uther says he braced himself. This is a turning point in his life, the moment his anxiety hinges on. This is the moment of resolution for his emotional arc, I guess, throughout this first chapter. It'd be amazing to take a sentence describing Uther finally coming to terms with the situation and striving on, knowing he's looking at more than just his children, he's looking at the future king, who will be a man of responsibility, whose responsibility will begin with these very next words that come out of Uther's mouth. This is a great opportunity for stuff that we just don't have at the moment. I think this scene would be just very much served by adding something like that. You're going to want a paragraph break between she protested and Uther shook his head, then combine that Uther shook his head with the dialogue immediately after. This is kind of tied into that issue with the paragraphing I was mentioning before. I read somewhere, though I can't remember now where, that one of the biggest descriptors of a writer's style is where they paragraph things, even more so than how they punctuate their moment-to-moment sentences. And I agree with that. And I would like to see different paragraphing. Maybe that's just me. Maybe don't think about it too hard. It just inhibited my enjoyment reading a bit. So we've got... So we have a line from Arthur here, but it's not attributed to him. This tells us that it was from Morgana. When he says, "When are we going?" So Morgana's talking, "Scots are our enemies," Uther shakes his head, "Not all of them." And then the next line, "When are we going?" This is Arthur, but we have no reason to think it's Arthur, so just attribute that, please. And I would suggest changing things like Uther acknowledged to concrete actions. Acknowledgement is not something that we can see, so it doesn't do much good telling us that he is doing the acknowledging. I think you would benefit from stronger transitions, from deliberately dramatic scene openings and closings. I love the opening dialogue line to this scene, but you have the opportunity here to close Uther's discussion with his children with an ominous or sentimental line that leaves something ambiguous between them or foreshadows later things, and then ending the scene right there. So the in late, out early principle for just good drama leaves out the little bits of boring things that necessarily happen in real life, but we don't really want to see in our fiction. Then you can scene break as time and space are changing, and open with, like, his children's looks of betrayal still haunted Uther on his journey back toward Eden, etc. Pled's role here is so brief, I feel like it would be more valuable to replace him with Bress, in contrast with the discussion between them we had at the beginning. Aside from that, I am not much a fan of the rest of this chapterlet thing. We went from a situation of high drama and importance where Uther's finding his strength to a point where nothing is happening. Uther seems to be anxious again, and we're really just reading Uther's backstory. And that continues through here. Maybe you want to have Aegir ask a little harshly, "Where do you plan on sending Arthur?" And have him say, "We can't afford to be as merciful with Arthur as with Morgana. My heir will require the strongest tie, a blood link. Arthur will go to Cadwallon," and end the scene there. Overall, I preferred one of your older drafts where we open with Uther reacting to the attempted assassination of Arthur. I felt that it held quite a lot of inherent drama and tension, and I personally love seeing that kind of stuff in opening chapters, as I'm sure comes as no surprise. But this has a lot of potential too. Uther is clearly a conflicted person here, and I think if that was drawn out a little bit more, this would be a really strong opening to a really strong book. So thank you, Sam, for submitting this. I am so sorry it took a ridiculously and unforgivably long time to get to it, but I really enjoyed doing the getting back. Thank you for watching.